Good.
Thanks for joining. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
I guess Walter Everett doesn't need no introduction, but this is Olivia Dodd. She's the. I'll let you introduce yourself. So,
Oh, sure. So my name is Olivia. Actually, am Everett Dodd, and I am the great granddaughter of Walter Everett, as well as the CEO of the new Walter H. Everett Foundation.
and the Instagram page.
Right. Which is yeah, the foundation. Just to give you some context on that, the foundation we started about I think well we started it during the pandemic. Technically, it wasn't it. We've been going through the process of actually having it be formalized as a private foundation, but we started the Instagram and Facebook pages in I think the fall of 2020 during lockdown. We had so to give some context to us and who we are. Um, my father is Mark Everett, who is the grandson of Walter H. Everett, and he purchased from the family the majority of the works that had been passed down from Walter to his father, Oliver, and then to my dad in order to keep the collection together. My dad had always had a vision since probably the 80s of wanting to preserve the artwork, keep it together, and then make it available to the public because he knew that there wasn't a lot of body of work of Walter's available. And Walter, of course, was an illustrator during the Golden Age of illustration, a student of Howard Pyle. As far as we can tell, he worked at the Pennsylvania Museum School for Art and Illustration, helped found their illustration department there, illustrated for the Saturday Evening Post, Women's Home Journal, Ladies' Home Journal, Women's Home Companion, Country Gentleman, and different magazines like that. Um, and so when these works became available, when Walter passed away, his son took them and collected them. And my dad, as I mentioned, wanted to keep them all together and make them available to the public. So we talked about it for years and years and years. And I had kind of given them the website, built the website for them as a Christmas present maybe 10 years ago. And then just slowly started to do things. But when the pandemic hit and I suddenly found myself at home watching kids, I said, now might be a really great time for us to put some energy and effort into it. So we did. And from there, I was honestly like flabbergasted when we started the Instagram page and suddenly we were getting followers. And then we were getting more followers. And I think thanks to an injection from a friend of ours, Vincent Zeus, who is a really wonderful oil painter in New York. He reposted some of the images that we had posted, and from there, I think he like gave us this injection of maybe 700 or 800 followers in just one repost. And we've grown to almost I think 3,700 followers and continue. So much so that I actually needed help to maintain the Instagram page because I have a full-time job and kids and
Right.
everything. And we want to be able to do stuff like this. So yeah, we've over the last couple of years, we've actually formed a board and are taking it really seriously with the mission of preserving and raising awareness about who Walter is and preserving the paintings, raising awareness of who Walter was, and getting the works out into the public.
Both Thomas and I know Walter from around 2014, 15-ish, if something like that, Thomas.
Yeah, it's sort of appeared sometime around that. Yeah,
How did
16
you
years.
first find out about him? Sorry, I just took over the interviewer spot.
No, go ahead, go
Oh
ahead.
no, that's how it should be. Yeah, like it's just conversation. Yeah, I mean for me, it was on Facebook, just a random Facebook post from a fellow artist, just showing like a painting of his, like a very impressive one of his later paintings, and like just a paragraph a little bit about him, and it was quite it left an impression on me, and I think on a lot of people. So
I think the thing that fascinated me the most is it was such a modern style. And when I had a painting open, I believe it were the nuns in the garden with the child sitting in the foreground. It's a beautiful painting. Unfortunately, I heard it was lost in the fire.
yeah,
And my colleagues were thinking, who painted this? That looks very modern. Artists in the industry right now, they really use it as reference. It's like Thomas worked on Arcane. He told me that all the references for the background paintings and the style, they had Walter Everett images up there for references.
yeah. I mean several of the artists, like even beyond the project, it's like an influence part. It's part of the mix in general, like beyond just one project. So
That's so fascinating to me. It's fascinating to me because, I know when we first talked, my perspective on Walter, I think is very different than most people's perspective on him, those who know him, because he was my great-grandfather, and because I grew up with these paintings on my wall. I grew up with the nuns hanging above the piano, in my household as a child. And there's this illustration of it's I think a charcoal sketch of a older man like swinging a hammer, and then there's a woman clutching her pearls as she looks like she's about to faint. That used to hang above our mantle. So these paintings were all around me growing up, and always cherished. We would talk about them a lot, and my parents would always say, in fact, it was that they would say that this is really important. This is your heritage. This is your history. Like, we want to preserve this. But, and when we would talk about like emergency plans or something like that, my parents would say, forget the jewelry, forget anything. Like the only thing you're ever taking is the paintings. So like, make sure that those go first. And they would always like tell us where the paintings were and, where to get them. And so, in fact, when the fire did happen, that was the only thing my parents left their house with. And the fact that we lost the nuns was, definitely, I don't think I've ever seen my dad really cry, but he cried when he realized that he didn't pick up that painting. They had about 20 minutes to leave the house. So, it was a massive tragedy when I finally did the inventory and we knew what lost, and actually sparked us starting this foundation and saying, we cannot just see these as family heirlooms anymore. We really have to preserve them for everybody else because it's not fair. I'm sorry, my fax machine's about to go off. We still have a fax machine at this office. Okay, perfect.
No, I can hear
so my point with this story was to say that when I think of Walter's works, I think about it as my childhood, and I don't really have that appreciation for what the art was. I think about it as more of a family legacy. And then in addition to that, I think about things that he obviously like reused some models. At least we think he did. So the gentleman in the back of the painting with the woman clutching her pearls is very similar to the older man in the nun's painting, which is very similar to the man who's the charcoal sketch of the blacksmith. And so my siblings would tell me that's actually our great-grandfather, which it wasn't. And he's trapped in the paintings. And so you see him following you from painting to painting to painting. And so wherever you go, there he is. So that's that's how I think of these paintings.
Yeah. It has a very personal importance. Like it's part of your life. Like, for us, it's just like a visual, like, I don't know, like, I guess what attracts everyone to it is just the technical and artistic excellence, which is kind of like, it's actually rare. Like it's funny how Walter Everett is not like very well known, at least not yet. Like people are attracted to it mostly because of that technique. It's awesome. Like that's why people like it, I guess.
So for you, when you're looking at these paintings and you're thinking about it, and when you saw the works and you're thinking about it from a technical standpoint, from a an artist's standpoint, what, I guess, about it for you, when you think of it and compared to other illustrators, because obviously, you've both been trained, I assume, in art, and you both spent a lot of time thinking about it. What for you stands out from the peers of that period, or even today? Because you were saying like it feels very contemporary, or the technique is really interesting. What makes it unique for you?
First, when I had a background at work, it's still my desktop background actually. The first thing people notice is this looks very modern, because the way animation looks nowadays, a stylized entertainment, is with these flat shapes, very designed, which is not an easy thing to do at all. And that's getting more and more popular the past 10, 15 years. It's only now, very recently, that sort of style got popular. Nobody painted like him back in the day, like in the 1920s, 30s. You have you had Dean Cornwell, it's a little bit later maybe, like Dean Cornwell, you had Leyendecker, certainly at the time. He did stylize. So I see Walter Everett as a Leyendecker who used colors, because Leyendecker, as great as shape design as he is and a draftsman, his color use was very monotone actually. Like he worked a lot with earth tones.
Yeah, a
But
lot of local colors also.
why
Yeah.
Walter Everett really embraced an impressionism and combined that with the graphic design.
Yeah.
But not looking like Leyendecker. There were a lot of Leyendecker copies at the time. Even Norman Rockwell, when he started out, it looked a lot like Leyendecker. So, but Walter seemed to be in a league of his own, really. Like, I haven't found a single other American illustrator that looks like Walter's work. And I have some follow-up questions about that later, because you said that back in the day it wasn't as popular, and and that's why he got frustrated.
Well, I was just, yeah, I was thinking that exact question. Like, why, that makes me think, like, what did people have against that at that time? Was it too much of a different way of thinking? Was like too simple, or?
Yeah, I don't, I wish, I was thinking about this before we hopped on the call, but I almost wish in a way, and maybe this would be great follow-up for you to talk to Alice Carter and Kevin Farrar, who are people who I see as the real experts on the illustration side of this. But from my knowledge, um, the lore in the family is essentially that Walter started to get more and more frustrated with his career the further on he went. And I think that now, as an adult looking over the paintings and having some knowledge of the chronology of his work, he became more and more himself, I guess, as he went older, as he became older, which you would hope, right? He started to really pioneer new styles, and there's definite, I mean, he explored many different styles over his career, and you can kind of see that. Everything from Art Deco, with some of his works, like the cover of, there's a cover of, oh my gosh, I'm forgetting it, but it's a very like, oh no, I'm losing all my my art
It's
terminology.
like Art
Art
Nouveau.
Nouveau.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
Muka-esque.
yeah, that, yeah, exactly. Yes, yeah. As piece of a goddess of the harvest.
I know that
So you
piece.
can
Yeah.
see that style. What you can see, like almost an impressionist works that he did. I've been told he did completely freehand and with no reference, like he just painted it. And you could see him dabble in all these different styles, but when you start getting into the 30s and the late 20s, the style becomes, like you said, this really color forward, simple shapes. Um, I think some really stunning landscapes that are just kind of his. I know someone had mentioned the trees, the button willow tree with the farm in the background. It's one of my personal favorite pieces. The colors are just absolutely stunning. And to see those magentas and oranges and purples and everything in a piece from almost 100 years ago is really incredible. Um, but yeah, that he started to do this work, which I really see as his, and he started to get less and less commissions. That he would do when he would get a commission, and the pieces that we see, they're pretty prominent in color works, but they're just fewer and fewer and fewer. And I don't know if that was health related. The story is, like I said, he became frustrated with his career, with the industry, that he never quite felt like he got the recognition he deserved. I think he was fairly egotistical. And so,
Most artists.
right, yeah,
All of them.
yeah. And so I think what he thought he was doing was really special, but that he wasn't, he was seeing his peers, and then I imagine eventually, his, not predecessors, but his like antecessors, the people who came after him getting much more popularity than he did. And it's also at the same time where you see, he used to do cover art, and you see cover art shifting from, commissioned works of illustration to photography. And you start seeing a lot more photography in the 30s,
Right.
taking the place of prominence. And I think that had to have been incredibly frustrating. And from my knowledge of art history, I think that he was also right at that apex of the divergence between commercial and fine art. And so what he saw himself as an artist. You know, he didn't see himself as a commercial artist. He didn't see himself as a um, he probably didn't like being commissioned very much, but that's how he made his living. And I think it was very, very frustrating that he saw over his lifetime being, you know, a student of Howard Proud who is heralded as a master artist to being relegated to, you know, this box of like, oh, well, you're not at this class anymore. Um, so, you know, again, that's kind of my understanding where he was on that wave of being a rock star, seeing his friends be like incredibly popular, and then all of a sudden kind of starting to see him getting sidelined.
But that was only for commercial art, not the fine art.
Right, right. But he never, I mean, I think he was, from what I can tell, you know, he did get great reviews because they used to do book reviews, you know, were really popular, and you had, you know, Reader's Digest was just, you know, book reviews. It was like, you know, we think of TV reviews today. And of course they would talk about the art and the illustrations in there, and he was always applauded for his work. I mean, and just by the nature of the commissions that he was getting, you know, we could tell that, you know, he had pretty good commissions, but, you know, he was never going to be selected for a museum show or, you know, something like that.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting the photography aspect. Like that makes a lot of sense actually. That maybe that influenced him to go in that more expression, not necessarily expressionist, but like more minimal and more colorful, and it's like almost going into a place beyond reality. Like he had to exaggerate things and. Like,
yeah, well, I think it's really interesting that you say that, because there's two things that I find really fascinating about that process, and that we could see from a lot of the works that we unfortunately had, some we still have, but for instance, that scene, or that landscape of the button willow tree, and he did a few other kind of tree landscapes. He would do incredibly detailed sketch studies of like the leaves of the tree, you know, and measuring it, and, you know, doing, you know, taking the leaves and doing the what's it called when you do transfer paper and you're like rubbings?
Oh yeah,
You know,
yeah.
of the
You
leaves.
transpose the drawing onto with a grid.
Yeah. Well, no. You're actually rubbing of it, and then like, you know, measure it out and study it in that way.
Oh,
and
like the
he was
okay. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah. So, you know, and doing these. In fact, there's this gorgeous that we still have. Like umber kind of sketch of a hand, just a hand. And I always thought, like, oh, he was just sketching a hand, but of course that's because I don't know process. And then Ken Farrar, I posted it, and I was like, oh, isn't this beautiful? He's like, yeah, it was a study for this painting. And he was like, off the top of his head, knew the exact painting of a couple where a woman's resting her hand on the guy's shoulder. And so he had done this incredibly intricate, detailed sketch of just that hand for that painting. And so you could tell, you know, he really, as much as he was simplifying the shapes and everything he was doing, he was that classical training that he had, that really wanting to get into the detail and into the depths of a painting. You know, he really had a process that was quite meticulous.
I mean, this is perfectly lines in what we were talking about earlier, Thomas. There is a drawing as well of a profile of a girl, which is so gorgeous with all the soft tones. And I think he did two versions of it where you can see the ear and the other one where it's covered. And then you see the painting, and it's so simplified in the painting. But what you said is that he painted fast, like usually. But I think it's because he did all that preliminary work that he could do the painting fast, because actually he put a lot of effort into the drawing and the understanding of the forms first. So then if you have all that knowledge, then the painting is fast because you actually already figured it out in a way. Like or you.
Yeah, exactly. He knew exactly what he was going to paint by the time that, you know, brush came out.
So there was no searching at all on the canvas. It was all planned, which is how it should be. Mm-hmm. Yes, all digital artists should learn from this.
Very different from how it is now, I guess. Yeah. That's part. I guess that's also part of the appeal, is that I think a lot of people now can sort of guess that that it did take a lot of preliminary work. Like it had to because it's so accurate. Although it's kind of mysterious how exactly it was done, but you can tell that he knew all the anatomy of like the like how to draw people exceptionally well, and it's not just about painting, a stroke or something, and so and that's very difficult to do now because there's a very different incentive structure in art, and like it's hard to be that meticulous now. So it's very it's also very interesting and unique, like in its own era. Like it's very hard to replicate.
And and I think that would be a question I would have for those who know more about this process at the time and how the industry was changing. But I do wonder,
Right.
now that you say that, if some of the frustration he was feeling at the industry, and like we said, we're going to photography, which, if you look at the photographs at the time, of course, they were doing lighting setups and they were doing makeup and everything. But I imagine it took a lot less time to do a cover photo of just a model, in a portrait than it would take, Walter, for instance, to do weeks of preparation and detail study and then do the painting and get the painting shipped up and everything like that. So I imagine that the pressure on artists to perform faster, even though he was quite a fast painter, he was not diligent. And so the time that he would spend just dreaming about a painting, because that's how he was trained, that was his process. He would go out and wander. He would not work for a long time. And then when he felt like the idea was good enough, he would then do all of his prep work and all of his study, and then he would actually sit down to paint. And by the time he would sit down to paint, it was already past the deadline likely, and his editor his art director, actually one of the art directors, came and sat in his studio with her knitting and just waited for him to finish the painting until it was done, and took a wet painting up, to be to be photographed. So
Really hated that.
he probably hated it. And then as the time constraints, as he knew his skills were getting likely better and better and better, and his vision was getting more and more refined, and the time constraints to say, bigger, faster, cheaper, I imagine, my guess would be that didn't sit well with him. But again, it would be a good question to ask those kind of experts in the industry and see if that lines up.
Yeah, talking about all of that, the mystery of the conceptual phase of the piece, like I want to clear up some things as well, because if you go to the Wikipedia page or a lot of articles online, it talks about that he burned all his work in a craze and everything. But if I look at the biography of a lot of American illustrators, they actually all burned their preliminary work, because to them it was just preparation for the final piece. And because there's also a train of thought that says like they don't want to see the process, what it takes, like they want it to be magical.
Right.
But I don't think it was that either. It was just, for them, it were just really sketches that meant nothing. Like it's only nowadays with the Instagram era
that's different. Yeah, no,
that you can post sketches and people like them. But back in the day, they were just, it had its use. It had its use. The piece is finished. I don't need all these drawings here anymore.
Right.
And
I imagine it's sort of like how I feel about notebooks, right? We go to all these meetings, we take notes, and then we, come up with the ideas, and then we just throw them away, because why do we need that?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, and you're right. And for the burning, if you want me to answer that part, I understand the same thing, but again, where family lore and probably reality depart is that, as far as I knew it, when in our family, the burning of the paintings was because he was upset and miserable, and didn't feel satisfied with where his career was going, so he burned everything. But as I have been on this path of exploring and talking to experts in the field and talking to historians who have done biographies of his peers, I would say, from the people I've talked to, it's not 100% one way or the other. Some people feel it was a little bit of a temper tantrum, and some people will say, well, no, it was actually a very, very common practice, so it probably had nothing to do with that. And it could have been also just space saving, just like we shred our notes. It was just like, we have all these oil canvases and sketches, and they're not going to the oil canvas might not disintegrate in my compost pile, so I got to burn it, or
Right.
whatever it may be.
Did he stay in the same house, like the same place for his whole life, or?
No, no, he moved actually quite a bit, I would say. So he grew up and was born in New Jersey, and he was the son of immigrants from England. His father, as far as I could tell, was a stonemason, um, and he was one of 8 children. So he had a really large family, and he would, when he was a late teenager, you can tell by some of his juvenilia, was quite already a accomplished, in art, and would ride his bike down to Philadelphia to take art classes. And he enrolled in Drexel University, so he moved to Philadelphia then for a little while. He was in Philadelphia. He moved to Delaware and had a studio in Delaware for a while. He believed died in Pottstown, Pennsylvania, on the farm of his brother-in-law, where he spent his kind of remaining years. And for a little while, I also believe he moved to San Diego, where his wife and son were for quite a bit of time.
Okay.
So he was
A lot
kind
of
of moving all
moving, yeah.
around. Yeah, yeah.
So just
Um,
yeah, I mean, this would be a great opportunity to clear up the Wikipedia bio of everything when he moved around. I can remember last time you talked, you said some interesting things that he moved to California for the history with his family and stuff. So let's dig a little bit deeper into that so that people get to know a little bit about the man Walter and more outside of the arts. Like if you knew he did other things on art as well, or
yeah, the things that I know that he did, you know, well, I guess I'll just start off and say, um, my family, meaning his son's children, his son had 5 children, and my dad is the oldest boy, the second oldest of the family. Um, so they don't know a whole lot about Walter as a person. We have little stories here and there. Um, and that being said, Oliver, my grandfather, was Walter's only child. And his wife, Mary Longenecker, lived with them the whole time. She was very, very different from Walter, as far as we can tell. She was very reserved. She was very Pennsylvania Dutch, to kind of keep her emotions close to her chest. She was, if you've ever seen the movie Arsenic and Old Lace, like the little old Victorian lady with the spectacle glasses
oh really
and the
like that?
Gibson girl bun on the top of her head, and a lace, high neck collar that she was. My aunts remember her still making her own patterns and sewing her own clothes in the Victorian style in like 1950.
Very
So
nostalgic, sort of, yeah.
very nostalgic little grandma, and she was Nana to them. And she was married to Walter she was married to him through he died. I think they got married in about 1905, maybe, and he died in 1946. So they were married for 41 years. And she didn't talk about him very much.
It's because at the time maybe like the separation, you couldn't divorce. That was like a taboo, like it was a big no-no back in the
Definitely.
day. So probably they stayed together on paper, but they lived separately. That's probably the deal.
Yes,
Yeah.
and but what's interesting is that they separated in about the late 19 teens. She moved to San Diego with their son, who was a teenager at the time, and um, there was some talk about it being for health reasons, to go to a warmer climate in California, in Southern California. She became a teacher. So there was some discussion about that, and so it would, in my knowledge, it would have seemed to have made sense that it was kind of over. The marriage was over, and they were just living separately. But Walter actually came to visit them several times and tried to come live with them for a while. My kind of presumption on the timeline of that is probably that it was pretty hard for him to work across the country from where all the publishing houses were, So he ended up moving back. They lived separate for a long time, but then in the latter part of his life, in the either late 30s, I believe, he likely was getting sick, and Mary moved back with him to take care of him. So she was there living with him when he died, and that in the 1946 when he died is when she came to live with my dad and family. So the that's kind of the chronology of what I understand. I believe they met in art school, so she was studying art at the time. I have absolutely no idea what would keep a very, tight-laced woman like her with a very free spirit like him, except to say, you know, being married and knowing my family, and knowing how couples work in my family, I imagine she was a bit of his rock.
Yeah.
She was the person keeping him grounded. It's
Good.
very hard to separate the artist and the man because I think that they were the same.
Mm.
And I think that, he lived his life in his imagination and he lived his life. There's no way
Most artists do.
working with art.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. There's no way he could. I've known a lot of, I've had the fortune and misfortune of knowing some incredible geniuses in my life. And it's hard to keep your feet on the ground. To me, it's an Icarus story, right? The closer you fly to the sun, the harder it is to stay safe and sane. Um, and I think he really dove into it. And I think he really dove into the world of those stories. And it, of course, led to affairs and it led to, a boisterous lifestyle as it did with many of his peers who all, probably suffered from liver problems
Of course.
and family drama. But he was right there with them. And I think that I imagine her being so grounded and such a different person, was in some way or form comforting to him. But I think it also probably made their life impossible because once they had a child and she needed that stability, and that was not who he was. He was never going to provide that for her. Um, but I do think they loved each other. And I got that impression, because, they wanted the paintings back. She wanted the paintings back. She liked having them around the house. But it was a little bit tormented because she basically would say, like, if you don't have something nice to say about somebody, you shouldn't say anything at all.
It's the
So
Bambi
she didn't talk
thing.
about her husband very much.
Yeah.
Mm.
um,
Yeah.
and when I went to when we've been on a real quest to try to put these pieces together, and I've been kind of feeling like an armchair detective. And my dad had told me at one point in time, I think my cousin Doug has some paintings and you should reconnect with Doug because it would be great to see those works and get his side of the story. And I was like, okay, great. How do I get in touch with cousin Doug? And he's like, well, your Aunt Lynn was really close with his sister Taffy. So, have your Aunt Lynn connect you. Okay. I call my Aunt Lynn and I'm like, hey, I'd like to get connected to Taffy so I can talk to Doug. And she goes, I haven't talked to Taffy for 50 years. I have no idea where she
Oh my.
is.
So detective work.
She goes, we were
Yeah.
really good friends in college, but that was in like 1970. And so I have no idea where Taffy is. And I don't even know what her first name is, but she was Taffy Jones. And we found out, of course, Taffy was a nickname. And so trying to find a Doug Jones in the United States was
Yes.
a bit of a task. But I actually did it through a lot of sleuthing and a lot of like looking at old newspapers and putting together this and that. It ends up Taffy married a pretty prominent math professor. And through him, I was able to find her because she was on the board of a nonprofit. And through her, I was able to find her brother, Doug, who lives in Santa Cruz, California, and does own 3 paintings and has since loaned them to us so that we can have them be part of the collection and on display.
Oh, that's
Um,
amazing.
which is amazing. And he's had 2 of them restored beautifully. And he said to us about the relationship with Mary Longenecker, about Walter's relationship with his wife. We were looking at one of the paintings, and it's a painting from Indian Summer. And it's this gorgeous, very beautiful, like pinks and purples work with a young man and a woman talking. And he's sort of like pointing his finger at her. And Doug his mother had that painting, and when Doug was looking at it, and his mother was saying, I'm thinking about having this painting cut in half, and he was like, what? And she's like, yeah, I think that we should throw away the other half and just frame the guy. And Doug was like, you can't do that. This is like a masterpiece, Mom. You can't. Why would you ever do that? She goes, oh well, that woman there, the model, she's the woman the harlot who broke your Aunt Polly's heart.
Oh,
She's like, I don't want her in my house anymore.
that makes sense from an emotional standpoint. But what you're saying about artists like sleeping with their models and stuff, I know that
Yeah.
Harry Anderson married one of his models. That's another illustrator, Dean Cornwell. Like I read his biography. He was just like Norman Rockwell, a horrible father, and he slept with all his models too. So it's
Yeah.
unfortunate that wasn't
Not
common
uncommon.
thing at the time. So
Well, I mean, they were both living in that world together, the
yeah,
fantasy world, the model and the artist, and I imagine it's pretty powerful.
yeah. Now we have references, so we're a bit more safe.
Yeah. So yeah, so that's and apparently Doug's family didn't quite inherit his aunt's sense for keeping family drama low key, which I appreciate because now we have a little bit more of the story. But as far as other things, sorry, you had asked. Going on these tangents. Feel free to keep me on track.
Oh no, this is great. I
Walter,
just want this to be a flowing conversation, so keep going. Yeah.
yeah.
There's no track.
Walter loved, the other thing I know about him is that he loved arrowheads. So there's a painting of him, the only painting I know of him, where it's called Walter Chipping Arrowheads, and he's sitting there with a drink. And so he used to roam the property living on the East Coast, finding Native American arrowheads and trying to recreate them. And so we had at one point in time an old, like, coffee can that was about the size of a head full of arrowheads. And they were, of all different materials. And he would just sit there and kind of chip at them. And he was just obsessed with trying to figure out how they did it. Again, that process, part of his brain needing to say, like, what was, what materials were they using? How did they chip it? What were the shapes that were being used? And so just all different sorts of ones. Unfortunately, those also were lost in the fire. But yeah, I'm glad to have that painting of him because, again, it was one of his passions. He also taught. So that was a big part of his latter career.
Oh, he was an art teacher?
He was an art teacher, yeah. So he taught at the Pennsylvania Museum School for Art and Design. I believe he was the founding instructor for their illustration department, which continues today. In fact, I just learned from Alice Carter, who is an illustrator and art historian, that she said she's very proudly taught in the lineage of Walter Everett. So her teacher was one of Walter's students, and one of her students is now the new head of the illustration department at that same school. So it's now it's now the Pennsylvania Art Institute?
Yeah.
College of Arts? Yeah. In Philadelphia. And so I think it's really, really cool to know that the lineage of Walter is still very strong in that department. And his students can still, like she said, any of the students that she knows that were taught by these Golden Age illustrators can all trace their lineage back to the Renaissance. And, in terms of instructors. And I thought that was really interesting and really cool. So Walter taught there. He also did kind of roving lectures. He would have lectures at his studio in Delaware, and you can see ads, that he was posting, for these classes that he would do. Another story that we've collected through the years of my sleuthing and having this online presence, which has been really fun, is one of his peers, who was also a student of Walter's, and a fantastic painter. He and his wife were both also fantastic painters. Walter used to come and practice his lectures with them, and the kids were all sent upstairs, to go play, be away from the parents while Walter was practicing his lectures. But this gentleman remembered, sitting on the stairs and listening through the grate through the vents to hearing Walter giving these lectures, and he just said that over and over again he would hear Walter say, color is emotion. It has no material substance, or something along those lines. And so he would say that over and over again as the kids, as when Walter would leave, would do these skits where they would make fun of his very self-entitled lectures.
That makes so much sense because I talk a lot with Thomas about, of course, art and about color especially, because I think Thomas has a great sense for color, and I struggle a little bit with color, and he always tells me like, oh, it's more emotional when I take Walter's work and I show it to him, like, why is this color there? And he said, oh, it's more emotional based than fact based, and I always was kind of thinking, what does that mean? But like I think just by learning more and more about life and colors, like I'm starting to get an idea, but I'm not there at all where Walter or Thomas are on that ground. But,
Well, it's not it's not an analytical thing. It's not something that you can solve. It's
Yeah.
how does it make you feel? And that's the aesthetic part of it, right?
are there any other notes?
You know, when I put these,
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
you know, when I put these two things together, you know, what does that feel like? Does that feel right? Which is, I always find it fascinating because for me, I think I'm more like you, where I want to overanalyze everything, and I want to know the right way of doing it, um, and to know like, oh, I can just step back and say, how does that make me feel, and that can dictate whether it's right or wrong.
Right. Yeah.
There's a lot of artists nowadays that use color more as an emotional vehicle than just, and I think that's the going back to the start of the conversation. He says what separates him from artists at the time. Exactly this, like the colors are more emotional instead of being.
Yeah, they're not necessarily really based on reality per se. Like there's a mix between representation and like representing something psychological or something hyper realistic, like hyper real beyond reality. I don't know. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but
Yeah, in that way, I never thought about it like that, but it almost is cinematic in that way. You know, of course, I'm a cinema person,
Yeah.
but you think about that where it's the softer light. The light doesn't necessarily make sense always where it's coming from, but it does make sense in terms of the emotion it's evoking.
Right. It's like manipulation of light. I mean, color is also light. So
Mm-hmm.
when a painter plays with light and color, they're effectively just playing with emotions, right? It's a lot
Mm-hmm.
like a director of a movie or something.
Right.
you're directing the
Yeah,
colors.
exactly.
You're designing them in a sort of. So I think that's apart from the shape design and the simple values, because there is this beautiful painting of a man on a boat and we see his back, and there's a guy with a pistol
Mm-hmm.
and he's holding a woman, and I could count the
Mm-hmm.
values. I mean, there's different colors, but the values are only four of them. And that is also something I don't see a lot of artists do at the time, to keep the value structure that simple. So I was just curious if there was any other notes that you remember from people that heard these lectures or took notes from these lectures that you thought were interesting.
You know, I think that's something I'm looking forward to studying more. And I was just given the tip, and for anybody on the East Coast who's interested, that you should check out the archives at the old Pennsylvania Museum for School for Art and Design. That the archives still exist, and in there are letters from Walter's students to, teachers or peers, and about Walter there and about being in his class, and notes from lectures. So I would love to dig into those and what people were learning. I do know that apparently he would send his students up to New York on the train with a wet painting as part of their assignments because he had to get the works to the publisher. Um,
That's so fun.
and, and I do know that he was apparently a pretty beloved professor, at least from what I've heard, that people enjoyed the class because he was so animated and so engaged, and really obviously passionate about what he did. He also, from what I understand, and again, I look forward to uncovering more because this really is a mystery where we're unfolding as much as everybody else, that he really leaned into the Pyle kind of philosophy on art, which was to immerse yourself in the story, to paint as if you were coming from the story, not from the outside looking
Oh
in.
wow.
And to surround yourself with nature and paint from the American perspective. I think a big part of what Pyle was trying to do was say, we American artists don't need to replicate what European artists are doing. We can create our own unique style. And part of what we have here is the terroir and this place. So I think that's where you see, for me, when I look at those later landscapes that he was doing, of kind of rolling Pennsylvania hills and, the Delaware countryside, you can see that love for nature coming through in what he does. And I frankly think you can see it in the trees in Peter Pan or Indian Summer or any of these, the way that foliage plays a huge part of his kind of, no matter where it is, of these paintings, in place and setting. I think he has a really, really rich sense of setting, in a lot of his paintings. So yeah, those are some of the things that I know. I also know when you were mentioning the pirate ship, and the name of the story is escaping me, that that model is actually my grandfather. So he was his son, holding a woman. You can see the strapping young man is my grandfather, Oliver, who definitely looked like he was a bit of a bruiser, like would get into some sort of, would look like he wasn't afraid of a fight kind of guy. Yeah, so, he definitely was using live models. He wasn't afraid to take photographs of his work and paint for those as reference. And trying to think of other things that we've learned along the way. He took notes for sure on a lot of his sketches. You would see little notes on the button willow leaf or those different sorts of things. Yeah, so again, I feel like I'm on this putting together these pieces and trying to figure out who this guy is. I feel like what I feel like is one of those kid detectives surrounded by all these adults who know what's going on, and that's like you guys and the whole art industry. I'm like, I'm learning, but I just have this passion to go and kind of figure out this mystery.
I mean, the good thing is that I already think that we cleared up a lot of things, because if I read so when I first was introduced to his work in 2014-15, I tried to search the internet for more works, and then you get these articles of, like, he didn't like his work, he went out of his mind, he moved into a shed in the woods, and he started sharpening arrowheads, and the only thing his family remembers from him is a bucket of arrowheads. And I was just like, wow, that's got... I don't know if the person who wrote this article did his research or this is true, so I'm kind of happy that we already unveiled a lot of this. It's like, no, it's not like that, because he was a great teacher.
It's not 100% how it was. Yeah, and I think that he, I would be curious to know what his relationships were like. I mean, and maybe I do wonder a bit because, for instance, I had the chance of digging through the archives at the Delaware Museum of Art for stories about Walter, and there really aren't any. And I'm wondering if the silence speaks volumes. I don't know,
The silence is the answer.
Yeah, but I feel like it's been incredible. We first put the website up 10 years ago and started to get, my brother would say, oh, I found this blog post about Walter, and there was this person who said that they knew him or, knew of him. And again, to us, it was always surprising when people knew of him because we didn't have that industry perspective of him. I mean, I guess it's not like any kid that's like, oh yeah, that's my dad. You don't know what he was like in business, right? You don't know what his relationships were like elsewhere. Kind of have a vague idea. But that's not really how we thought of him. And so we're learning more and more, and it's been so cool. I feel like every few months at least, and then sometimes it comes in waves, I'll have people email me or send me a DM and say, hey, I have a Walter. This was gifted to me in this way. And So we're seeing these works, which most of the time they give us permission to post, which has been incredible, you know, and we have a few, just a teaser that we haven't posted yet, which I'm really excited about. And then to see people, share stories and go, oh yeah, he was a friend of my father's, or he was a friend of my grandfather's, and this is kind of what I know. I'm, talking to people like Alice Carter who are like, oh, you should look here. I know that there's information about him there. It's all really word of mouth at this point in time. As you said, there's been that step-by-step article, which was the first big thing done in the 80s. I've been interviewed by somebody doing a book on illustrators, but it's really been sparse. I just feel like we're learning more and more as we go. So I'm really excited about what the next few years will bring as we discover more. I think for me, some of the time crunch is knowing that the more and more time that passes, we're already lost. Basically, everybody who has a memory of Walter himself. Mm-hmm. My aunt, who's 81, says she remembers when she was like 3 or 4 years old, going to this farm and walking up these really kind of janky steps and seeing this old man with white hair, and she's pretty sure that was Walter. But that's the only person I know who has a first-hand
accountant,
knowledge of him. Yeah. And when you say old man, he died at 66, so he wasn't that old.
No, but the life expectancy of famous artists wasn't that much. Like, I think Zorn died at 60 from drinking and smoking too much, so...
Yeah.
It's, I guess that was a byproduct of the success, or the lifestyle or something. But...
Yeah.
The drawings you mentioned of the hand and the head. Are there any more drawings that have been uncovered for studies of the paintings, or they are very sparse because that's the one he was actively trying to get rid of?
Well, no. So it's a yes and no answer. Okay. So yes, there were lots of sketches. No, they do not exist anymore, unfortunately, because of the fires. So what we have on our website in terms of sketches, except for a few sketches of paintings, is what we have, what I know to exist right now. And then there's also a couple sketches at the Delaware Museum of Art and a few of their places. But as far as I know, those are the only in existence. Very tragically, we had some portfolios along with the nun's painting that didn't make it through the fire. Again, why it became so incredibly, we saw how fragile these works are, and we didn't want that to happen again.
No, of course.
We can't. So I have some really horrible cell phone photos, which was just I literally one day in like 2012 sat down on the floor and just took like quick cell phone shots of everything, and my idea was
to scan them properly at some point, right?
Yeah, then I was eventually going to scan them properly, but I just kind of wanted to have a backup reference for like, oh, this is what we have. So a lot of them are blurry, and and it was a 2012 iPhone. It wasn't the best.
Still, I would love to see them, because I as an artist, we can watch through the. We don't need sharp pictures to see the detail. Like if you just get, at least it's something,
Well, we would, we definitely hope to make all that available as well. It's a bit of a process just getting everything organized. And Kev Farrar, who I absolutely adore, who is really, I would say, the world's expert on Walter Everett, and has spent since 1980s. We actually just posted on Instagram a little audio clip of him talking about Walter. I had the chance to interview him about a couple years ago, and we're just getting those clips online. He gave us all his files from researching Walter over the last 4 decades. And it's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pieces of scans, old like library scans in black and white from the 90s, and different things that and stuff compilations he's put together where he said, oh, these are the reference, sketches for this later piece. And so we're still through organizing, cataloging, figuring out all that, and we look forward to making it more available as we get through that. So and some of the old cell phone photos that we do have, and anybody can feel free to message me if they're looking for something in particular if I have it. But We have some horse hooves, so like you would do like details of horse hooves or sketches in preparation for the three women bathing, or you could see different poses that he was trying out. Very simple,
Oh
the
yeah,
1 minute, 2 minute sketches, just really
those are the most
quick
interesting
stuff.
actually for to see how he starts and he thinks about the construction of the figure. Earlier on, you said that the Doug Jones, you found, and he had three paintings, and he lent them to you for display. Where can people watch these paintings in person? Then, when you say for display,
Well, they're not currently available in person yet, and
okay,
that's something that myself and the board are working on right now. Is our plan for this year is really to say, okay, how can we get a show up and going? Where would a good, place to be a show? We want the right partners, and obviously
right,
all of that as well. So the only time that they've been available to the public that I know is in 20. We did a museum show here in Napa Valley in 2014, I want to
hmm
say, before we really even had all this information and everything. Um, so, yeah, I'm hoping that you can hear more in the upcoming few months about, if we can get a show lined up. That would be really exciting. Um, we also are going to be the new works that Doug and a few others that have made it our way. We're going to be having professionally photographed, and those will be up on the website in the next couple months as well. So we'll be able to release a few new works. Some I had never seen before, so I'm really excited about that as well.
yeah, me too. I'd love to see them in person.
Exciting, yeah.
Yeah, if it's in California, or I would even travel to the
Well,
East Coast.
you're welcome. You guys, if you want to make it up to Napa Valley, we would love to show you these works up here.
Okay.
Nice.
And that's a genuine offer. Please come up.
I think Rembert can do it, but for me it'll be harder.
Yeah, he's in Germany, but yeah, I could. Yeah, definitely, most definitely. I'd love to see them in person.
Please
Yeah.
do. Just, message me a good date and time. We'll make it happen.
Now anyone on Instagram is gonna message you like, "Can I come in person to see them?" You're opening the
This is
floodgates here.
special.
Random people.
Yeah.
We do hope that what we'll be able to do, and again, we're still figuring it out, but what we hope we'll be able to do, and what one of our other board members is researching, is like a good storage facilities for these works.
Yeah.
Again, we're going to be doing a little bit of fundraising and figuring it out, because we want to be able to make sure we sustain all of this. But we're going to be finding a facility, and ideally we'd love to find a facility that is not only secure for the artwork and keeps it in good shape, but that where we could actually bring people to do visits,
Yeah.
when we're able to. So,
And a nice art book at some point with.
yes, we've gotten that request a lot, so I would love to do a nice art book, so that people can see, and I'd love to work with some people like Kev, who really have that knowledge of the history, and we can put together some of that. What I would imagine would be fascinating would be to see those sketches along with the paintings themselves, so that they can see that process unfolding.
Usually that goes together with an exhibition to have a catalog as well that you can. So, yeah, fingers crossed for
Yeah.
that. And if you need any help with that, like I'd love to help out.
Wonderful. Well, be careful, because I'm really good at recruiting people.
Okay. That's great. Yeah. I think those were all the questions we have for now. Unless, Thomas, you had a last question. We're at 1 hour and 5 minutes right now. So,
Not really, no. I mean, I was thinking, like, maybe those cell phone photos, you could give it to like an AI or something to enhance it, or something. I
yeah,
don't know.
actually, why not?
That might work. Maybe
Yeah.
there's some new stuff, from that.
For all the good.
Absolutely, put the AI to good work.
Thank you, AI.
Yeah, awesome. I just really appreciate you guys reaching out and showing your interest in doing this, and listening to my very non-linear storytelling. So thank you.
No, it was great.
It's great because there's almost no information from him, and the information that is there is not verified. So I'm glad. I know you're still verifying this all yourself as you go along, because it's all word of mouth. But still, like, I trust your source much more than a random article on the internet, so that at least people can have a.
Well, I will say that I think a lot of the articles that we have are, it's been a game of telephone.
Hmm.
So, where we got the family side of the story, which was, you know, not always accurate. And we've been learning more accurate versions as we go along and do this process. Like there were some, even just the number of siblings Walter had when I did the genealogy, and I was like, he had like 8. And family member was like, no, he didn't. I'm like, no, he did.
Okay.
um, so, just learning these different things. So we've been correcting, but I think that a lot of it comes from that first article on Step by Step that was then kind of retold, and then people are kind of changing some of the details along the way, just little bits changing here and there. So, we've definitely been a part of that cycle. And again, I'm excited to sort of do this in the more academic way, where we're really verifying resources or sources and saying, no, we can actually prove that he met Norman Rockwell at some point in time, or whatever it was, it's kind of lore at this point.
I mean, it's fair to say if he was in the East Coast and he worked in that publishing, there must have been parties where all these illustrators grouped up. There's no doubt in my mind that he did meet all, probably like some very prominent names. So that goes without saying, I think.
Well, no,
yeah. I mean, if you're published in the
I
center,
know when Pyle.
go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just saying. I know when Pyle died, there was a big exhibition in his honor. In the teens, I believe it was. So, it was seen as a loss. I think from the articles I read, a pretty prestigious American hero in the arts, and people were really sad. So I think they had like 50 students of Pyle's come out and do an exhibition. And Walter was on that list. So, I know that he definitely knew a lot of people in that scene.
So there's more that will come up through time. The more we spread this word online about Walter, so even people watching this or in the future discovering him, maybe it's like, oh wait, like you said, my great grandfather has a drawing that he gifted at one time, or a napkin sketch. So I think more of those things will uncover, and I do hope so. And if anyone knows anyone that has it, then they can also refer them back to Olivia and the Everett.
Yeah, definitely. Please do. Yeah, if anybody has more information or stories or hopefully paintings or sketches, we would love to see them, because we're able to kind of keep track of that. And when we are able to do shows, if people are willing to lend a work to a show, it's really incredible to see the interest that there is. We would love to see people enjoy it. That's absolutely our goal. So I hope that any others might be willing to come forward as well and join us.
Definitely. I mean, I'm already in, so.
Great.
So
yeah, me too.
Yeah.
If there's an art book, I would definitely buy it. I'll buy like 2 copies or 3 or something,
Perfect. Great. I'll add you guys to the wait list.
Awesome. Yeah. So this was, I think, important for our industry, because, like I said, and just to reiterate, he's a huge influence nowadays on a lot of games, of TV shows, animations, etc., etc., and just for people, their personal work as well, and for fine art. So it's I'm glad that people are uncovering him again, because you said, like, at the end of his life he felt kind of like jaded with the industry and everything, because the photography, etc., or the fashions, the styles changed. So I'm really glad that nowadays, like, that actually people see that he was truly a genius in his completely on his own planet, in his own world, because there was no one else like him. So yeah, thank you for spreading the word.
Exactly.
Yeah, thank you.
No.
All right. Well, thank you guys. This was really fun. I love talking about Walter, and again, and fact check me. That's what I say too. It's like, please feel free to fact check me. I love being corrected.
Well,
yeah, in the comments, please fact check Olivia.
Yes.
All right.
So thank you guys. All right. Well, more to be revealed.
All right. Thank you.